you mangy dogs. Swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm, if your work be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. The Chappie, my boy, on with the show.
Aye, aye, Captain. To our listeners across all regions of the planet, welcome once again aboard the Robin Hood, flagship to the world's one and only cooperatively inspired charity podcast network. Broadcasting today from under sporadically sprayed South Korean skies, this is episode 38 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. I'm your host and Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tonight's guest, Michael Vandeven. A longtime fan of overnight radio legend Artbell, Vandeven is the 37-year-old founder and owner of BellGab.com, a popular web forum dealing with radio, politics, the paranormal, and technology. Hosting a number of podcasts since 2006, Vandeven has done mornings, news, and engineering for 3 talk stations over the past number of years, while also logging experience as an overnight 9/11 medical dispatcher. In 2007, Vandeven set out on a 3-year adventure, driving an 18-wheeler through every major American city, touring an array of historic locations, including Dealey Plaza and Meteor Crater, Arizona. He currently owns and operates a computer services company in Missouri, and is a father of 2 girls, aged 4 and 1. Michael enjoys playing drums in his spare time and is currently pursuing a bachelor's degree in telecommunications and networking at Southeast Missouri State University. Well, standing out here as we are on the docks of Skullport Harbor, I see Pirate Larry here. Not sure where our guest is for the day. Michael, I think it's pronounced Vandeven. Oh, he is there? Okay, that's great.
Yeah, but I don't think any normal person would read the name and pronounce it correctly, or at least pronounce it like that, so I could forgive any pronunciation.
It's got to be a Dutch name too, of course, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Very Dutch indeed. I look Dutch. Everybody I know is Dutch. I'm living in a Dutch wonderland here.
In Missouri?
No, I'm kidding. I don't know. Everyone I know isn't really Dutch, but yeah, it's a very Dutch name. My family came over to the States from the Netherlands, I think, in the 1880s. And long line of Vandevens.
Well, this is interesting because one of the things that we do here with the show and our good ship here that we call the Robin Hood is under the captain, the way that he has things laid out through the ship's articles is that he requires each of our guests to, well, why don't we get Pirate Larry? Maybe Pirate Larry be the best person for this job. Pirate Larry, why don't you give him the lowdown on how things work here with the Robin Hood?
Well, there be rules, Chappie. And one of the rules is that in order to board the ship, you must tell a pirate story or have a pirate jig. And if it's deemed appropriate, then you board the ship as one of the pirates.
I'm thinking with the family lineage from the Netherlands, there's been a few Dutch pirates, I'm sure, over the years. So I'm not sure what sort of story you had in mind exactly, Michael, but hopefully you've got something that you'll be able to share with us today.
Well, I'm not going to give you a story of the sea, because the word pirate was never defined for me in that way. But what I will tell you is this. You brought me on, I'm going to say primarily because I started BellGab.com. What a lot of people don't know is that I used to run a pirate internet radio stream, and it did nothing but play Art Bell shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That was the nucleus of what started BellGab.com. BellGab.com exists as a direct result of piracy.
Whoa. Now that is so heavy, and the reason I say that is because the irony here is that I myself would not even be here today doing this if it were not for the Facebook group that was set up under the BellGab URL. I'm not sure if you saw that Facebook group or not, but a bit of a story there. And one thing led to another. And you remember, of course, that whole deal with Art and Keith and Leo Ashcraft, the way that all kind of played out in such, I'm not sure how you describe it, a bit of a tragic comedy, perhaps. But one thing led to another. I got kind of drawn into that whole thing I was just more a spectator than anything, but Leo, for whatever reason, wanted me to just kind of proposition me, basically, in a sense of wanting me to come on board and serve in capacity of news producer and presenter and all kinds of different things that he was throwing out at me there at the time.
Are you talking about when he went to go set his own thing up? He wanted you to be a part of that?
Yes, exactly. And as you know,
I think you dodged a bullet there.
Well, yeah, I took it on more as a social experiment than anything else because...
That it would be.
Yeah. His reputation had preceded him in a big way. And I figured, what the hell? We can do this. And I approached things cautiously, but at the same time, it all kind of led into this, I ended up being, he had this, alongside night with Neil Schulman, and I was there kind of in the background, kind of a part of the Peanut Gallery entourage and crowd that they'd managed to assemble, as well as Dark 30 Radio with Jeremy Scott. I guess that's now gone tits up. So he had me come on board there as the show's executive producer. So myself, I had no experience in any of this stuff. He essentially just wanted to he felt it was fine just to throw me into the deep end of the pool and take it all from there. So, but and that's how one thing, once again, leading to another. And I just had no real interest in being a part of any podcast project, but that's how it all kind of turned out in the end here. As I said, one thing leading to another. So, and here we are today with this project. But that's really quite something with your... Tell us a little bit more, if you would, then, about...
Well, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
We got to go back to one thing.
Sure.
Pirate Larry, you never gave the yay or nay on my pirate story.
I would have to say you qualify as a pirate. That,
Okay, what was your question? Go ahead.
Actually, hang on. We have a special guest here on the sideline. Somebody's coming through.
Yeah, Michael, that'd be fine. This is the Captain Long John Sinclair. It's all good, maybe. So, more than enough to qualify and be a part of today's show.
All right.
That was Captain Long John Sinclair. He doesn't show up too often, but no, if he's giving you the thumbs up, then I'd imagine, we're good to go. So welcome aboard the Robin Hood.
Pass me a dead fish.
Okay, and a bottle of vitamin C. How about that?
No, I'll just have the dead fish. I don't do vitamins. Thank you.
Well, if we're California based, it's like there's no choice in the matter. You're being compelled to consume these things now, much like the vaccine. So
there's enough vitamin in the fish, Jeffy, but you may need a little rum to shoo the flies away.
We want to make sure all of all the guys on board here, all the men and women on board, are not suffering too badly from the scurvy. So we'll have to maybe infuse the fish through stealth.
Squeeze a line with that fish. Yeah.
So hey, listen, Michael, I'm not sure if there's anything more you want to share with us there regarding that whole history, but it's definitely something.
Well, I watched. I mean, it seemed like so much of that played out on BellGab.com. And for anybody who doesn't know, Leo Ashcraft, you may recall, I'm sure pretty much anybody listening to this, most people listening to this are going to recall, late night radio legend Artbell came back to radio in the form of an internet radio show. One of the people who worked for him and was doing news for Artbell was this Leo Ashcraft guy, who after a few months of work flipped out, said he wasn't getting paid what he was supposed to be paid, went all over the internet making a public spectacle of the whole thing as much as he possibly could, as much of a spectacle as he could possibly make. And, and then I remember, by the way, you pronounce it Jaffe, right?
Sure.
Okay. Jaffe, I saw your article that you linked and sent me, and I thought it was very well written. I thought that it was about time somebody went to the very beginning of that saga and outlined how things played out to the end, because the Leo Ashcraft saga was probably one of the more, the whole sudden premature end of Art's tenure at midnight, Artbell's tenure at midnight in the desert, that was embarrassing, sure. But I think an even more embarrassing moment in Artbell's ill-fated return through midnight in the desert was the Leo Ashcraft saga. Just watching how people who any other time of the day or week would tell you that they are professional people are out having it out in public like this, saying the most asinine, ridiculous things about one another that you just can't believe there's any benefit in putting out there publicly. I mean, for a while, this Leo Ashcraft, his Facebook page existed for nothing more than to curse the existence of Artbell. And I'm thinking to myself, does this guy, Leo Ashcraft, he goes on and on about his lengthy, voluminous, legendary career in radio, which I'd never heard of him until he somehow got connected with Artbell, but whatever. So how is it that this guy thinks he's going to go out all over the internet and say these things and then later down the road continue working in corporate radio, let's say, in any capacity? I mean, if you could go back, and I'm sure that a lot of those messages posted on Facebook, I'm sure a lot of them are archived on belgab.com. There's an entire thread devoted to this whole saga. And some of the things he was saying just, I would really feel confident, render you unemployable at any corporate interest if those messages were to be read. I just couldn't believe some of the things he was saying about Art. It was absolutely ridiculous. And you just had to shake your head and say, how in the hell does Artbell come into contact with these people? Where is he finding these people? There's just problem after problem that before Art even came back, he had quit prior to even starting a couple of times. Once it was because of bumper music. Once it was because he had a falling out with Keith Rowland. And by the way, I have to say, I'm now a part of pop culture. Hi, Mom. And here's how that happened. One of those times that Art kind of announced that the show was off and it wasn't going to happen. This was before the show had even started. It was because belgab.com was down. It was forwarding. If you typed belgab.com into your web browser, it would actually take you to George Norrie. No, it would take you to coasttocoastam.com. That's where it would take you. It did that for about 24 hours. We eventually got it fixed. And while that was happening, Keith Rowland accidentally publicly tweeted some snide little comment about me, like, and by the way, Keith Rowland is Artbell's longtime webmaster, whatever that word even means in the year 2016, but that's what he is. He went on Twitter and posted some snide little comment about me, but because my website was screwed up, kind of like, oh, well, I guess he doesn't know what he's doing. Too bad he's not humble enough to ask for my help. It was something along those lines, but he didn't mean to post it publicly. He meant for it to be a DM to somebody. At least that's what people concluded looking at it at the time. Art found out about that, and there had already been numerous complaints about people having a problem with Keith Rowland here or Keith Rowland there. So Art went to Keith and said, look, you're going to have to quit being a dick to people. Pretty simply, he put it that bluntly. You're going to just have to stop being so jerky with people, whether it's in Facebook comments, wherever. And Keith Rowland at that moment just threw his hands up and said, I quit. So Midnight in the Desert almost didn't happen because Keith Rowland tweeted something mean about me. That's why I say, hey, look, I'm a part of pop culture now.
Keith, what's up with that? If I can't be a dick, then I don't want to be a part of things.
I've seen so many instances where he was mean to people, and he absolutely didn't have to be.
Right. Well, once again, unfortunately, very mixed reputation, to say the least. So that's just unfortunately the way it goes. Personally, I haven't heard too many good stories about the guy, although there's been a few people that they'll come to his support, speak good things of the man. So I have no opinion, frankly, other than just sort of commenting on what it is that I've observed.
Well, I've had personal direct interactions with him, and I was not impressed.
Uh-huh.
I find that a lot of the people who've said positive things about him suddenly stop saying positive things about him once they no longer have a personal motive. or something to gain by doing so. And a lot of those are hosts who were, a few specific people come to mind. Because you recall that stream that Midnight in the Desert was carried on, it wasn't just Art's show that aired on that stream. There were numerous other podcasts that were being aired on that stream 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, almost 24/7.
And that was Leo that was behind that. That was his job, was to keep that infrastructure.
Was it?
I believe so. Yeah, he was central to building up the network. He was working for Keith, and he was paid just total peanuts too. That was one of the kind of the breaking points there after a number of months. That, as you'll probably recall, just he only ended up getting supposedly like $150 or something like that after a couple of months' work. So, but hey, listen, we could go on at great length with this saga, but one of the things I'm just going to say here is I did manage to share the link here with people in the text chat on YouTube. We have a handful, about a dozen it looks like right now, viewers taking in the slideshow that we have streaming at the moment. So thanks. First one into the room today was Brig Denholm, who I'm sure you know.
Of course it was.
Yeah. She's been on your show a few times, I guess. Chef Chemist.
She loves me. Brig adores me.
Sure. Yeah. She's one of your biggest fans. Chef Chemist, Star MTN 001. I'm not sure if these are the same handles.
Star Mountain.
Yeah.
She loves me too. Okay.
So I guess some similar handles as to what you find, over on bellgab.com. So yeah, but let's quickly then, we're talking about, different sort of 6 degrees of bacon here, and maybe some of the friends that we have online friends, at least virtual friends, in common. I'm not sure how many of these people, you've actually, or anyone really has a chance to meet people that they know through the web. But Joshua Chairs, what has become of that young man anyways? He's just simply fallen completely off the radar. His Facebook accounts seem to have, every month or two, really, it's like there was a new Facebook account that he would have popping up. So, and then they would just as quickly disappear and fall by the wayside. Any idea where he's hiding out at these days, or if he's even still around?
He follows me on Twitter, and I follow him on Twitter. Every now and then, I think just a few days ago, he sent me a DM that said, "Hey, Mike, what's up?" And I said, "Hey, what's up with you?" And then that's all I hear. So I don't know. I mean, and really, I don't know him beyond like a few courteous, nice Twitter messages back and forth. So I don't really know him in any specific capacity, really.
All right. Well, we'll have to try to track him down through Twitter then, just and extend a thanks to him, because actually Joshua was instrumental in helping set this interview up. He took care of the booking end of things, as you.
It's been so long ago that I forgot about that, and you're right. He was, I think, the person who came and asked me about this.
That's right. So, yeah, I think he's been trying for a while now to. I think one of the things he's been talking about is picking up his broadcaster's license or something like that, as well as.
Yeah, I don't know what he means by that. He said that to me too, and I'm like, dude, you haven't needed a license to broadcast in terrestrial radio in like 35 or 40 years. So I don't know what he was referring to, unless he's talking about ham radio.
Right. Yeah. So, but he's definitely quite committed and keen to being a part of, I guess, either podcasting or, as you say, like terrestrial radio. Who knows? What's the deal with satellite exactly? People like, Howard Stern and, Opie and Anthony, those types. Is it the same kind of setup there, or do they face the same sort of...
Satellite's done. I really think satellite's done. I mean, we live in an age where you walk around with, let's say, if you could take the computing power of the average high-end Android device or the average... let's go back 2 revisions in iPhones. Compare the power in your hand to a computer just 15 years ago. You're holding what would leave people in awe in the palm of your hand or in your pocket. And it allows you to listen to any amount of content, video, audio, the overwhelming majority of which is free. It's connected all the time, everywhere. There's nothing you're cut off from. Satellite doesn't offer that experience. There was a liberating feeling to satellite as a platform when it initially came along, because we had not reached the point where we are now. where everybody's walking around with internet-connected media devices in their hands. We weren't anywhere near that at the time satellite came along. So when it did come along, it did feel liberating. It was a new paradigm. Wow, I can drive all the way across the country and listen to the same station. Holy crap, that really is something. But it's dead. Number one, because of the smartphone paradigm. The way we see content has changed. Content is cheap to us now. It has very little value. Anybody can listen to 20 different podcasts for free, or you can host your own podcast. I mean, what we're doing right now is certainly evidence of that. So content is very cheap now. It's very unappreciated, and people are mostly unwilling, I think, to pay $15 a month to listen to radio, particularly when you listen to the audio quality on satellite. It's very heavily compressed. The music I find unlistenable. I don't like listening to music where somebody else is choosing the playlist for me anyway. That's finished.
Yeah.
Again, I have this device in my hand. I can do anything I want exactly as I want to do it. Why would you leave it up to some program director who doesn't know you, will never know you, and frankly doesn't give a crap about you? Why would you let him choose a playlist for you when you've got this massive supercomputer in your hands, in your pocket? It just makes no sense. But the thing that really, to me, was the death knell for satellite radio was when I started seeing satellite radio personalities fired as a result of things that they said on Twitter, things that were not illegal, things that they said on Twitter in their personal Twitter feeds during their time off. And I'm referring specifically to Anthony Cumia, who was one of the hosts of the Opie and Anthony show on Sirius XM. He got into an altercation with a black woman in New York City at Times Square. He was out at about 3 a.m. taking pictures with his camera. She assaulted him, made several racial slurs to him as a white guy. He went on Twitter. He was angry. He was irate. He immediately left the scene after that was finished. He was also surrounded by a crowd of people who were physically threatening him. So he was shaken. He was angry. He was shocked. He went home, got on Twitter, and immediately went on what was referred to as a racist tirade, but I didn't really necessarily interpret it as such. I just interpreted it as the level of anger you would expect from a guy who's out at night innocently taking pictures with his camera, who's called a cracker MF by some woman he's never met in his life. I kind of thought his anger was on a level that you might expect from somebody who was just in the heat of a moment of that nature. Because of the comments he made on Twitter, his own Twitter feed, his personal Twitter feed, on his own time, something that did not happen on the radio show, he was fired. And the Opie and Anthony show was finished, and to me that was the end for satellite radio.
And that was, they were being carried by Sirius
XM.
XM?
Sirius and XM are the same company.
And they were, is that like an offshoot then of Clear Channel?
No, not at all. Sirius and XM used to be two entirely separate satellite radio companies. XM was the big company. Sirius was the joke that everybody laughed at. And somehow Sirius, I don't know how the stars in this universe aligned to make this happen this way, but somehow Sirius ended up buying XM. It was totally counterintuitive. Nobody saw it happening that way, but it did. And so now, whereas at one time you had two options in the satellite radio business, you now only have one because of this incessant tendency we have to just allow everybody to merge. No user choice, no consumer choice, no consumer protection.
Right.
Just let all these companies suck each other up and we'll all just shut our faces and go with it. And Sirius XM is another example.
Yeah. Well, people just, we have to learn and to vote with our computer mice and our money and our feet, because really that's the only real vote that we have as far as I'm circumcised. So.
It's getting harder and harder though.
Well, it in some ways, I suppose, yes. But hey, and so where does Clear Channel fit into the whole picture then? Are they competition of sorts, or is that just all like smoke and mirrors?
I don't know. They've got their own problems, don't they?
Yeah.
I think Clear Channel, which I guess is now called iHeartRadio,
right,
is something like multiple hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. I think it may be even billion. I think could it be billions? If it's not billions, it's hundreds of millions. They are an imploding enterprise, and it's because they've really got no balls. I mean, have you ever heard a Clear Channel station? Have you heard what those sound like? It, in many cases, is literally just a shed with a transmitter sitting in it, and all the content being played on that transmitter for that local radio market is coming across a satellite feed to that station. And there may be some automation systems in place to inject things like local newscasts or local weather forecasts between music or whatever it is that's being played on that station. But otherwise, it's a cold, soulless, spiritless, uninteresting, cowardly enterprise that in 2016, again, when we have all of these media options at our disposal and these phones that we carry in our pockets, why would anybody listen to that, particularly considering the additional commercial load? They are constantly upping that because the cost per minute of airtime to advertise on a terrestrial radio station is going down, down, down every year. So in order to make up for that, of course, what are they going to do? They've got to run more commercials. So in addition to everything that just inherently sucks about listening to radio compared to your phone, it's getting worse by the year, not better. So where does it go? I don't know. I mean, I think terrestrial radio is finished. The only thing that has any hope of survival in terrestrial radio today is talk. You can't do music. Everybody's got music. We've got music everywhere. Everywhere I turn, people are offering me free music. I can listen to music on YouTube. I've got music all over my phone. I can pirate music on hey, there would have been another pirate story for you. I'm an avid lover of the Pirate Bay.
Oh,
but there's music everywhere.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So talk radio is it. If terrestrial radio is to continue existing, these local stations are going to have to stop being so cheap and pulling out everything off the satellite and start spending a little money to hire local talent to come in and host radio shows on their stations and have a little courage. You know, they're so cowardly and ballless that not only do they not want to spend the money on paying somebody to come in and do that, they're afraid of something happening. You know, oh, my God, what if there could be controversy? Or what if we brought a host in who says something that the station is going to be liable for? You know, it's so much easier just to pull the audio off the satellite and let somebody else handle the liability and to spare you the expense. It's not helping radio. They're going to have to start hiring guys in off the street to come in and do talk shows.
How is it that people, Howard Stern, for example, he's the obvious example, and you, of course, too, are clearly speaking from the standpoint of experience here. You've spent quite a few years in the radio and broadcasting field. That's why we're able to have such an informed and, insightful kind of perspective presented to us here today. But Howard Stern, how is it that he manages to, hundreds of millions of dollars for a 5 or 10 year contract, yet so many others are shut out? It's like he's the king and there's nobody else. And where does all that money come from anyways?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, there must be something going on that I just don't have my finger on the pulse of. Howard Stern's first contract was a $500 million contract, $500 million to one man, to one human being. Although I will put the caveat out there that he was contracted to pay his own staff. So, Robin Quivers, Fred, Baba Booey, all the people in the periphery who make that show happen, Howard had to pay them. But good God, how much could that cost? Another $5 million, maybe?
Maybe, yeah.
Per year. So that's only $25 million out of your $500 million contract. You're still left with $475 million over 5 years to spend on yourself. Although Robin probably gets paid pretty well, probably better than would account for only $25 million. But the point is, I don't know where they're getting the money to pay him, and he just signed another contract that I think was either for the same amount or more. I don't recall.
That's right.
But
yeah, that's right.
It was equally jaw-dropping, and I just cannot believe that enough people are paying for satellite radio to fund that. Although SiriusXM is now owned by some holding company. It's not even owned by people who understand radio or know radio or have a passion for radio. So maybe these people who own SiriusXM as a holding company have investments they're able to liquidate and invest in the company, and that's where that big chunk of money comes from for Howard Stern, and they're just hoping that it saves the platform and pays off, because I'm guessing that once Stern is gone, what's left that satellite radio can stick its hand up in the air and brag about? I don't know what else there is. Since 2004, I've been a huge Opie and Anthony fan. I thought that show was the best kept secret on the entire platform, at least in terms of talk. And so the fact that show's no longer in existence, I can't imagine a single reason why I would listen to SiriusXM. And someone might say, well, what about the news channels? You can listen to CNN, you can listen to MSNBC, Fox News. Okay, well, I can get my phone. Here we go with this again. I can get my phone, get in the App Store, install the Fox News app, and listen to streaming Fox News on my phone anytime, all day long. So what's the selling point? I don't get it. Howard Stern's getting pretty old. I mean, he's not going to be able to do that forever. It'll be interesting to see what happens when he's no longer there.
And he's apparently not a real big fan of podcasting either for some reason. So he really he looks upon the whole kind of phenomenon with a great deal of scorn, actually, is what it sounds like. So what I can gather. And that there might be something behind that too, because my guess is, this, I might be totally off base here, but yeah, I mean, podcasting is the way of the future. It has been for a few years now. Who knows where it'll all sort of lead and culminate, but.
Do you remember in the Howard Stern movie, when Robin got fired or did you see the Howard Stern movie?
Bits and parts, but.
Okay. Well, there's a scene where Robin Quivers gets fired and they bring in her replacement. It's some uptight old white dude named Ross Buckingham. And he sits down, Mr. Buckingham, to read the news in a newsman sort of way. John Lennon today died at the age of 40. Yeah. And he views Howard Stern with he's so nonplussed by Howard, he has no idea what this dude is doing. It's like nothing he's ever seen before. He doesn't take Howard seriously. Howard is farting into his microphone and talking about lesbians, while this Ross Buckingham just wants to read the news. Sort of like a Walter Cronkite figure. Howard has become that Ross Buckingham guy. Podcasting and spreading information in this way, unrestricted, no boundaries. There's no corporate interest stopping you from saying anything. You can monetize yourself in whatever way you choose, or not at all. Totally up to you. But it doesn't stop you from being able to have yourself heard. That is the future. How anybody could look down upon that or thumb their nose at it condescendingly, viewing it as an also-ran. Well, okay, today it might be an also-ran, but in 5 years, 10 years, how many people are going to be getting their information or their entertainment from something that's called a podcast versus how many people are going to be getting it from terrestrial radio or traditional means? It's obviously the future, but Howard is now the old man that he once reviled. He is what he hated. He is the Ross Buckingham guy. And so I'm not at all shocked that Howard thumbs his nose at podcasting. I've heard somebody say that before, though.
Well, look at something like one of the examples that comes to mind, someone who's done really well for themselves is Mark Maron with WTF. Of course, and he's got a lot of big names and personalities. He even had Obama on his podcast, for crying out loud. Came and visited him, I guess, in the garage where he has it all running out of. So, yeah, and you can just imagine how that kind of undercuts people like Stern with his huge operation, and it's really done quite successfully, too. So, anyways, let's see. We got a lot of activity here in the YouTube chat. Seems you have quite a few fans here that are dropping by. Almost, are you some kind of cult leader or something? What's this praise MV and amen, so say we all? What's the deal behind that exactly?
It's not a cult, but there is a lot of poon involved. I will say that. It's been great. Thank you. I'm Michael Vandeven.
What poon?
No, it's no cult.
What does your wife think about that?
Well, you know, it's
open relationship.
She understood the deal right up front. I was like, look, I'm doing this thing on the internet. You just got to go with it, honey. She understood. Once she saw those Google AdSense checks coming in, I can promise you she didn't have any problems with it. It was all groovy. No cult leader.
Yeah. Speaking of which, apparently you're doing, I was going through some of the archives just the other day, and I guess you're doing pretty well there from a financial standpoint. I'm not sure how the income is or revenue is generated exactly, but, you know, BellGab it's a pretty popular site and forum. So how long has it been around? What gave you the inspiration? And where do you see things heading over the course of the next few years?
Well, many years ago, and some of the people listening have already heard me tell this story, so I'll try and use different inflections and place emphasis on different words to make it more entertaining and fresh for you. But many years ago, I recall there was this website called, the Godlike Productions. GodlikeProductions.com, I think, and they had a now legendary George Norrie sucks thread on there. And for anybody who doesn't know, George Norrie is the man who took over for overnight radio legend Artbell when Artbell retired. And George Norrie has been hosting the show that Artbell once hosted now for, I think, over a decade, maybe 12 years. He's been there quite a while. I didn't like George Norrie. I tried to give him a chance for a good, solid couple of years. I just could not continue ignoring certain tendencies he had, certain stylistic. There were certain quirks, certain things about George Norrie that I just could not continue overlooking for the mere purpose of trying to stay in touch with the genre because art was gone now and I missed it. I gave up on George after about 2 years, and I eventually found the George Norrie Sucks thread at Godlike Productions. And it was really nice and comforting to find out that there were other people out there who felt exactly as I both consciously and subconsciously felt about George Norrie. And one day I got into the domain name buying thing. I just started buying domain names, and I thought, what the hell? I'll buy GeorgeNorrieSucks.com. I owned it for quite some time and had no idea what to do with it. I owned it probably for 2 or 3 years before I did anything to it. I think it just went to a parked GoDaddy page. Eventually somebody suggested that I start a message board with it, and they showed me SMF, or Simple Machines Forum, which is the software that BellGab runs on. I installed it, and that was the beginning. I mean, that was in April of 2008. I used to drive a truck over the road. In a former life, I went on a bit of an adventure for a few years, and I drove an 18-wheeler all over the United States and into Canada a few times. I've been to every major American city as a result of that. And I started BellGab. At that time, it was GeorgeNorrieSucks.com, but it's still the same form you see today. I started that from the sleeper berth of a trailer rig in a truck stop in Pennsylvania. And that was the beginning of BellGab.com. Eventually it changed to CoastGab.com from GeorgeNorrieSucks.com, and then it changed to BellGab.com whenever Art Bell came back to broadcasting in 2013. You may recall he was going to do the Dark Matter show, the ill-fated Dark Matter show on Sirius XM satellite radio. Well, we can all go back pretty easily into the shallow recesses of our memories to recall how that panned out. It only lasted 6 weeks, and it was certainly a little embarrassing. We'll just put it that way, the way things happened there. So that was it. It became BellGab in 2013. It's been the same forum, though. I mean, all the posts are still there, save for a few that have been deleted over the years for whatever reason. Maybe moderation approaches have changed a bit over the years. You know, there were times when, if you went back into the past, you would find that the approach to running things around there has changed many times. I mean, there was a time when just being mean to people might get your post deleted. It's really evolved, or some may say devolved, into something where as long as what you're posting is not illegal, you can pretty much say whatever you want. And I learned a lot of lessons, too. You know, there were situations where I stepped in to moderate something that shouldn't have been moderated. And you learn lessons from that sort of thing. Maybe people were banned who shouldn't have been banned. You learn lessons and you evolve and you adapt. And so Belgab's gone from a place of relative control and predictability to pretty much the Wild West of the Internet. I mean, really, I don't think there are a lot of places like it. I think you'd really have to search hard for a forum, a traditional Internet message board where you could have a leash as loose as what you have on Belgab.com. There's a lot of freedom on that website.
So it would seem. I've actually myself been over there to kind of surf around a little bit and check things out. So it might even be worthwhile maybe putting a bit of a membership or a profile together and chiming in on things from time to time. We'll just have to see how that goes. It is very information packed, though, definitely, and it's during that whole the Ashcraft debacle. I did follow the thread that you had mentioned earlier, so that was helpful and contributed to the end product of what you see there with the story that I managed to put together, the article called Radio Wars. So drama. Speaking of which, you actually had a chance to interview Art, and I'm not sure if this was after he pulled the plug on his latest incarnation of the show, or maybe give us, if you could, some more details on that and how you felt that went over. And there's a lot of people, of course, too, that were quite upset with his whole story. A lot of people did not really believe that this scenario that he was presenting had actually played out, that it was more of just theatrics and done for ratings, him being shot at and his family having to take cover and protect his wife and kids and whatnot, so that he was being pursued by some crazed stalker of some sort. Yeah, if you would, just kind of just a quick kind of recap overview of the interview, how that went, and what your thoughts on that whole business of him, how he ended things essentially in such dramatic fashion, whether you actually bought into it or not.
Well, the interview happened after Art quit his latest show, his latest endeavor. And it happened because Art was posting on Belgab, and somebody said, "Art, why don't you go on the Gabcast with Michael?" And he said, "Okay, sure, when?" And that really was that simple. Somebody else asked him, and he agreed, and I said, "Okay, I guess. Hello. You're volunteering me for a show with Art. I guess I'll do it, but, I was not even a part of this process, but I'll do the interview, sure." And it was kind of surreal. I mean, I started listening to Artbell in 1993, I think. So it was just weird that here he is on what I guess for all intents and purposes could be called my show. That was really weird to me. It is impossible. I've done hundreds of interviews, hundreds. A lot of people don't realize that because in radio, I used to do news. I've been a news anchor at 3 stations. I was a news director at 2 of those. And so I've done hundreds of interviews. And one thing you'll always find in the course of interviewing people is that it's impossible to come away from an interview and not be struck in the center of your forehead with something that you wish you'd talked about, or something you meant to get to. It's the nature of things. You're never going to overcome that. And so there were a few of those after Art's interview, but I thought it went pretty well. I had questions written down that I wanted to ask Art, but it's very unusual that I do that, because usually I just like to have a conversation with somebody the way I would if they were sitting on my couch.
That's right.
And but with Art, I felt like there were certain pressing issues that needed to specifically be addressed, and so I did write some questions down. Most of them I got to, and a lot of people loved the interview. A lot of people hated it and thought it was a waste of time, that I blew it. I mean, it's just, there are going to be people who feel multiple things about what it is you do. A lot of people who didn't believe Art's story were angry because they felt like I should have just come in there with brass knuckles on and tore Art a new one so that they could vicariously feel satisfied through my aggression. Or I even saw some people who thought that I was a little too forward with Art, or that I asked questions I shouldn't have asked. So it's like, whatever. I didn't really care how anybody reacted to the interview, because I knew I ultimately wouldn't be able to come away from it with everybody being happy. And really, who cares what anybody thinks? I mean, it's the internet. If my family were disappointed with me because of the interview, that would probably impact me in some way. But people on the internet, no. You know what? Go do your own Artbell interview if you didn't like mine. That's how I feel. The reasons Art gave for quitting, I think, were bad reasons. I think Art believes what he's saying. I think Art believes somebody fired a gun at his home. I think Art believes there was some level of danger around his home and to him and possibly to his family. As to whether there really was, I don't know. But I will say that I never got the impression that Art lied to me as a listener in all of those years that I was listening to him. He presented things on the radio that weren't true, that were false, but he never said these things are true, believe them. He would bring people on. They could pitch whatever they're pitching, and you as the listener could choose to believe or not believe. But Art never said, hey, this is the real deal, and if you don't believe it, well, then you just don't know where it's at. I mean, he put it out there. You could believe what you wanted to believe, but he never outwardly lied, explicitly lied to his audience, I don't think. And so when this incident happened, I had no reason to feel like he had lied, which there are a lot of people out there who believe that once Art got into radio again with Midnight in the Desert, as he got into it, came to the realization that he just really does not want to do this anymore. And he had to come up with some escape hatch to get out of it, but save face while doing so. And that this was the story he came up with. I'm not in a position to say that that's true or not true. I'm just saying that I don't feel like Art's ever lied, at least not to my knowledge, and I don't really see any reason to start thinking he's a liar now. I just don't. A lot of the people who were upset that I didn't just come on and smash Art's face in that night, first of all, I would have looked really bad doing that. I mean, I would not have come out on top, because this is something that this audio of him being on, that's something people are going to be listening to 20 years from now. People who are Art Bell fans are going to want to listen to things that Art Bell is a part of. And so people are going to hear that interview 20 years down the road. And I don't think the minutia of why Art quit, what the circumstances were, was Art telling the truth, wasn't he telling the truth, I don't think that that's really going to be pertinent to anybody's listening experience 2 decades into the future as they listen to that. So that's why I didn't go down that road. And again, because I don't necessarily feel like Art Bell's a liar. How about that? And anyone who does think that he is, they had the opportunity to call in that night and make their case. Not a single one of them did. Not one. Not one. They had over half an hour. They had like 45 minutes of calls taken during that interview. Not one of them called in. But as soon as the interview's over, oh, my God, you blew it, Michael. Why didn't you ask him this? You know, it's just like, what's wrong with you people?
How about that? So, yeah, it's not too many people that get the chance to interview Art Bell every day. So congratulations. Yeah, myself, I'm not, I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, as it seems like that's kind of your approach as well, too. So, and reserve judgment. So I think that's really the best way to approach things, really. And that could be one way, it could be another way. What the hell do we know? I mean, we weren't there, so it's just one person's opinion or word over another's, I guess. So, anyways, listen, we've got a few people here on the sidelines over kind of chiming in via YouTube here in the chat area, wanting to know if this is a call-in show. We're always open to taking calls. What you have to do is just shoot us a quick request via Skype, and we can work on bringing you on board. Right now, it looks like we've got, what is it, Star Mountain, I think? She's one of your regular listeners. Is that right, Michael?
And quasi-stalker, I will say. She's been chasing me all over the internet for years. Oh, dear Lord, it's Star Mountain.
I hope this is okay, but we're gonna try to add her to the conversation here just for a little while.
Oh, please do.
See how that goes. So, Star Mountain, are you?
Oh, just a second. Let me mute the
You might want to type your Skype username in the chat room so they can connect to you.
So you have a question? You have a question for Mike? You have a question, Star Mountain?
How are you, darling?
Hi. How are you?
I'm lovely, thank you. Why are you calling us tonight, sweetie?
I didn't call you. You called me.
That's bull butter.
I have been busy PMing bell gabbers with the link here that you're on.
Well, we can see that with only 15 of them having shown up, they were not buying what you're selling. I'm sorry.
Well, whose fault is that?
Well, I'm not saying I'm the most impressive guest. I was going to say at the top of the show that as the 724th most famous owner of an internet chat forum, it's only fitting that somebody should ask me to be on the show. Thank you.
Hey, how did you manage to? Are you for real there? Like, you managed to somehow track down your and confirm your ranking via the web?
No, no.
That would be something, though, wouldn't it? I mean, because you can't do that with some websites, for example. So that'd be interesting if you could have like chat forum web ranking. Somehow, people that would be in place for people to look up if they were so inclined. So, yeah, Star Mountain, you have a question then for Michael or I'm not sure what would you like to ask him?
Oh, why he called?
I did not call you.
Uh-oh.
Well, somebody called me.
I did not call you. I have no ability to call you. At least not in this context.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
You really did? Are you saying that you received a call just now? You did not call us?
I did not call you.
I'm sorry. I've never seen you as a liar, but you know what? I just am not buying it.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, we'll need some documentation. We'll need some documentation, screenshots, IP addresses, and a copy of your Windows registry, please.
Okay, if I was the one who called, why don't I have my headset off?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I thought maybe he picked up when you called and you weren't ready for the pickup.
I got a Skype request here from Star Mountain, so she was part of the YouTube streaming chat conversation that we've got running there live over the web at the moment. So, and people were wanting to know if they could ask questions, whether this was a call-in show or not. So, okay, a little bit of obviously a case of someone getting their wires crossed there. So maybe a bit of something of you were doing pretty good with the comedy there, Michael, but I'm not sure if that was Star Mountain's intent or not, but there we go.
Someone in the chat room says Star Mountain sounds very drunk.
Yeah,
someone else says she's just happy.
A few people are saying that, actually. So speaking of having maybe a little too much of that fire water to ingest and having knocked back, we haven't heard too much of Pirate Larry over the last half hour or so. He's completely fallen off the radar. Sometimes guys up there in the crow's nest, they have plummet to their deaths.
I'm stone sober in the crow's nest.
Oh, here we go. What's up, man? You've been following the conversation here. There's all kinds of different issues I'm sure that you could hit on here and chime in with offer your opinion on. So, any thoughts?
Well, it's all wonderful. It's like, it seems to me it's a story of somebody who had a lot of talent, and at the beginning of the story I thought about the conflict between talent, which creates content, and then the engineers that the talent needs to build the iPhone so that you can get the content.
That's right.
And a lot of times the engineers don't have a lot of social, finesse or whatever. They just think these amazing things in their heads, how do I build this? And so they like to get out in the garage and make shit. And then there are other people that are going, look at this wonderful world and, more of a social thing and can create content. And so you have this guy Artbell, and this amazing trail of content that was created by him just opening up and letting anybody say whatever they wanted to say at midnight. And the tragedy of the thing is that he never I mean, he never left anybody there to like manage what he had created. On the other hand, you know, he spawned many, many children, I suppose. And so that's why we have, you know, the internet as it is today, you know, a good portion of it. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts.
Oh, that's great.
And yes, I'm waiting to go to the pub in the after show. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be doing that. It's another 30 minutes or so is kind of what we're looking at here in the meantime. But Michael, what do you think of those pearls of wisdom?
Well, I want to tell Pirate Larry it's a good thing you are not intoxicated, because to be inebriated in the crow's nest is probably an OSHA violation, which I don't think you want to be a part of.
Also not good on the stomach. It's not good with the dinner.
I would think just being in the crow's nest period is not good for the dinner. So yes, add alcohol, no thank you. I've never been on a boat drunk. I've been on boats, but never drunk. I wonder how I would handle that. I don't get seasick. Do you guys get seasick?
Larry's more of the old sea dog. Myself, I was shanghaied actually one night. I guess you're not really too clear up to speed on the backstory, but yeah, I've had no experience up until just recently when I was actually out drinking with some friends in a pub and was blindsided. And the next thing I knew, I woke up on a pirate ship. So yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge to say the least.
You got to be kidding me.
No, that's
you know that the city of Portland here in the United States has a long history of people getting shanghaied. They had an entire, and still have, this tunnel system that exists underneath numerous bars with trapdoors in the floors of these bars designed for nothing but kidnapping unsuspecting young drunk guys to force them to be deckhands on ships. Now, I think it's probably been a very, very long time since any of these trapdoors have been operated for this purpose and these tunnels utilized and the jail cells within them filled. But they still exist, and that's why they were put there. A lot of people don't know that about Portland.
I had no idea until just a few moments ago. So that's something that, definitely have to put on my list of things too. And maybe others will as well too, of course, their list of stories, things to investigate. There's tunnels everywhere though, it seems, all kinds of various cities through the world, really, not just, North America is a recent example, but Europe and Asia and the Middle East, absolutely.
So how did you get out of this situation? I mean, I want to hear the conclusion. You were kidnapped?
No, I haven't got out of the situation. They've left me with no choice. So they said, you're the kid with the golden voice. We want you to sit here behind the mic and kind of work on putting this show together. And, you're either going to do it or you're going to, you'll walk the plank or face the tip of a very pointed sword. So,
well, then I have to say I feel bad about being a guest here because it feels like I'm tacitly endorsing and or contributing to your imprisonment. I don't like that.
It's not as bad as some people might think. So I managed to come to terms with things. And the crew, they're not a bad bunch. The captain, he's okay as well. Pirate Larry, of course, and it's a motley, it's an assorted lot here of, all types, but, we're out on the high digital seas and it's a life of adventure and an experience, really. So maybe it really was my calling. That's something that I was kind of in some ways forced into, but I should have been maybe a part of many years ago and just hadn't realized. So, well,
I hope they're giving you vitamins of some sort. I hope that occasionally you are finding yourself basking in some amount of sunlight. I mean, I'm just worried about your living conditions. I understand Stockholm Syndrome, and you've come not only to accept your lot in life, but to sympathize with your captors. But I would have to tell you, snap out of it, man. You need to find some way to escape. Don't allow yourself to be co-opted, please. Pirate Larry, why are you not helping him out of this?
Oh, God. Poor Pirate Larry. Oh, jeez.
Well, it seems they had trouble getting volunteers for sailors.
Who would do the job? Who would do that job? It's a horrible job.
Absolutely.
Hoist the sails or stay in jail. And so, at least there's adventure, there's taverns, there's, women. There's life outside of jail. So, but yeah, the sea, we didn't have a lot of volunteers.
Not much gold to this point either, but we are hoping that there may be some on the horizon here, just around the next corner. So you never know, man. Just stumble across a bit of a treasure chest, or
The treasure is a journey, my friend. The treasure is a journey.
That could be it as well. But so listen, there's quite a few other issues and whatnot we're hoping to plow through here before we have to wind things down, Michael. So I guess, yeah, so clearly not a George Norrie fan. But one of the things, though, the new host of Midnight in the Desert is Heather Wade, and it seems to be longtime listeners of Art's shows. I guess from what I understand is that the subscriber base was significantly depleted, that the numbers of people wanting to pay to listen and basically to be, paid subscribers to the show, it fell off quite dramatically. So, but at the same time, there are people that are fans of Heather's, and basically, I guess what I'm getting at here, what I'd like to ask you is, what are your thoughts on the new host, and has she been doing a respectable enough job to this point?
I wouldn't know. I don't listen. I mean, I just can't listen to that. My problem with it is that I think she does a dishonest radio show. I mean, she was a Bell Gab user for many years. I don't know how many, but for years she was a Bell Gab user before she had any direct involvement with Artbell professionally or whatever. And yet she now, as the host of his show, as the fill-in host, the substitute host, never mentions Bell Gab, even though if it weren't for Bell Gab, I truly believe that Art never would have come back at all with Midnight in the Desert. And there are so many interconnected webs of just backstory that I couldn't even begin to go into to explain why that really is the case. But I do believe that if it weren't for Bell Gab, Art Bell would never have returned with Midnight in the Desert. And Heather Wade certainly, without Bell Gab, would not be hosting his show right now. But because people on Bell Gab have said mean things about her, she never mentions Bell Gab on her show. Anytime a caller calls in and mentions Bell Gab, she pretends she didn't hear it and just moves on. I consider that dishonest radio. It's not interesting to hear someone who is just that uninterested in maintaining a connection with reality and being honest with the listening audience about what it is she comes from or what it is that she's aware of out there. I mean, if you listen to the show now, you wouldn't even know that she's aware Bell Gab exists. It's just, and it's not, I'm not looking at it from the perspective of our forum needs to be promoted, see? It's not like that. What I'm thinking about is, again, as someone who for many years was a fan of radio shows like Opie and Anthony, these guys would tell you about a boil that they had to have lanced on their ass the night before. It was such brutally honest radio. I mean, they would talk about things that were honest. They would talk about what's happening in their private lives. They would go into things that typical hosts would never talk about because it's just not what you do. It was honest radio, and I don't detect any of that from Heather, and that's the primary reason why I don't listen. I feel like if you're going to go on the radio every night and pretend you have a thick skin, which she likes to pretend, then it's a little dishonest to then say you're no longer going to use Bell Gab and you are not going to mention its existence on your radio show because people on there said mean things about you. Makes no sense.
Well, that's this part. You're going to have, being part of podcasting or broadcasting, anyone that's in the public spotlight to whatever extent, you're going to have to be able to weather those slings and arrows as well as the praise, of course. So, Redacted, that's the name that I was looking for, and that, that's pretty much public knowledge. That was her handle over on Bell Gab, I guess. Amy Martin, was she not also a part of things over there, too?
I think she started an account on Bell Gab when she took Leo Ashcraft's position reading news for Art Bell. I think that's when she signed up over there. But yeah, Redacted, A lot of people still call her that. They don't call her Heather Wade.
Sure.
They call her Redacted. So, I don't know. And she was also one of George Norrie's primary critics on the forum. So now to go host an internet radio show and to replace Artbell yourself after having criticized George Norrie and said some of the most vile things about him. And I'm not even criticizing her for saying those things. That's why the forum existed for many years, was to publicly revile George Norrie if you didn't like him. That's why it existed. The domain name was actually GeorgeNorrieSucks.com. It's just I'm saying don't then become the new George Norrie and replace Art Bell and get broken up about it when people say mean things about you on the internet. And that's exactly what's happened. The irony.
I guess so. Maintain your authenticity, I guess, is one of the things you're trying to kind of get across here. So isn't that something? And the thing is, so she changed then, I guess, is that's what you're getting at here too as well, that she became a different person, kind of sold out in some ways, I guess, perhaps, might even go that far.
I don't know about that. I don't know if I'd say sold out, but at a certain point she began believing that the entire world was against her. And so she began lashing out at people, myself included, who weren't against her and who had done nothing wrong toward her and really had done nothing but support her and provide her with platforms to get to where she got. And she just, at a certain point, I don't know, I think she lost grip with reality a little bit. Go back into the archives and listen to that night when she called into the Gabcast and had a little spat with Bateman. He's a Belgab user. Had a little spat with him. She sounded unhinged, crazy. She sounded like my bipolar older sister that I don't talk to. I mean, it was very odd, and things went downhill fast from there. But I would say that probably a majority of her listening audience, and she's got a pretty good audience. If you go look at their stream, if the numbers are accurate, she'll have something on the order of like 1,800 concurrent listeners. Like at that very moment, 1,800 people or so will be listening. And for an internet radio show, because they have lost all the affiliates, save for like K9, which is the radio station that Art Bell used to own in Pahrump, Nevada. They've lost all the affiliates effectively, the terrestrial affiliates. So to have online 1,800 concurrent listeners, that's pretty solid. There aren't a lot of internet radio shows that can boast that. I mean, like me, for instance, I think the most concurrent listeners I've ever had during any podcast was like almost 600, and that was when Art Bell was the guest. So to have 1,800 nightly, that's pretty good, but I don't think it's necessarily a commentary on her. I think it's just a commentary on Art Bell's legacy and the chair that she happens to be sitting in.
One of the commentators or the guests that we have here in the YouTube chat is suggesting making the claim, I'm not sure, a little tongue-in-cheek perhaps, but Heather was a phone sex operator. So that could be a joke, but make of it what you will. She's kind of a witchy lady apparently though too, from what I've heard. So I'm not sure if you know much about that yourself or not, but apparently she's like of the Wiccan path is one that's central to her spiritual. That's basically what she self-identifies as a Wiccan. I'm not sure if you have anything to say on that matter or not.
I find that stuff annoying. I mean, I feel like a lot of people who call themselves witches or Wiccan or whatever really are just afraid to. I've even said this I've got a little thing on, if you go to ufoship.com and you click on things Michael hates, or things MV hates, it's up in the main menu, and one of the items is about Wicca, or people who say that they practice Wicca, and I say something to the effect of, they just don't quite have the courage to, they're upset with God because they didn't get a Super Nintendo when they were a kid. They don't quite have the courage to sidle up to atheism. So, as a matter of manifesting their displeasure, they say they're Wicca or whatever. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's just, I find it in an era of motorized vehicle travel and electricity, it just seems silly to be, okay, that's your chalices and your charm beads. That's wonderful. Great. I'm having none of it. It is true, the phone sex operator thing, but I will tell you that I have always felt that like that was an unfair angle that people were using to attack her, because there's nothing illegal about that profession. It's a legitimate job that she was doing, that she was getting paid for, and we all make our way in this world, I guess is the foundation of my point. You know, everybody is making their way in this world in whatever manner seems best for them at any given moment. So I really don't hold that sort of thing. I'm not prudish enough to hold that sort of thing against anybody. I would never rub her face in that as if that's supposed to hurt her in some way, because I don't think it should.
No, that's exactly right, and I totally agree. It's what Pirate Larry often refers to as the struggle. We all have to deal with it, and it's pretty much like you laid out there for our listening audience that, we're going to do whatever it is that we can to survive and get by. So sometimes it gets to pretty extreme ends, of course, but she's a very attractive lady too. Have you seen pictures of her, of which I'm assuming you have? And
only one.
Yeah, but not that has anything to do with phone sex, because I think with that sort of industry, you don't really see people's faces. It's more just the voice end of things and how they're able to talk dirty, I suppose, and try to help people get off. So. Well,
if a guy is willing to pick up the phone and pay for that, and someone is willing to be paid hourly to answer the phone on the other line, and both are consenting adults, I consider myself very libertarian on these types of ideas. I believe prostitution should be legal. I believe that people should be able to smoke as much pot as they want as long as they're not driving a vehicle under the influence and harming other people or neglecting their children or whatever it is. So I have very libertarian views on these sorts of things, and I don't know what kind of hypocrite I would be to say, hey, you with your phone sex past. I mean, that's just, I have no problem with that at all.
Well, you are Dutch, after all, so it kind of makes sense, I guess, doesn't it? I'm kind of saying that a little in jest, of course, too. But anyways, we've got Bathtub Jen. She was in the house here just a little while ago. I think she just dropped in just to quickly touch base and check in. She had other things to attend to, though, unfortunately. We still got close to...
Is she a witch? Maybe my Wicca comments turned her off.
Nah, she's a gonzo journalist. We've also got Susan Isles, I think that's how you pronounce her last name, a.k.a. Alchemy Doll, over at Minds.com. That's where a lot of our regular listeners actually, Michael, tend to come in from is Minds.com. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or not, but thanks, Alchemy Doll, for dropping in and being part of things. Just quickly, yes, I am. My name, once again, Jaffe Ryder, the host of Pirate Radio Podcasts. We run things here out of South Korea, of all places. Co-host Pirate Larry, based out of Baja Ensenada. Let's get that flipped around. Ensenada, Baja. That's California. Zone Libre. So, yeah, a lot of activity there in the text chat. Have you, so Minds.com, just that was one of the things we had here that we wanted to kind of just bounce off of you. Have you, assuming you probably haven't even heard of that social network, have you?
No, never. I'm loading it up right now. The circle is spinning. So this is your social network, it says. Launch a channel today. What does that mean?
Well, it's kind of like Facebook, only better. So, and I've got no problem saying that whatsoever. It's a heavy emphasis. It's open sourced, the coding, the way that things are set up there from the programming end of things. There's a heavy emphasis on anonymity, as well as, they have the booster point system in place as well, too, of course, so you can boost your content free of charge, unlike the way that Facebook works. So there's just, they've got quite a few things going for them. I'm not sure if I missed out on anything. Pirate Larry, do you want to is there anything more that I missed out on there that you think you can maybe help to add to kind of flesh things out?
So a channel requires an email address. If you have an email address and a password, then you create your own channel. And if you want to remain anonymous, then, you can destroy the email address and disappear, because they don't keep the logs for that long. The chat is encrypted, and basically they built it for privacy, But a lot of people, activists, have moved over. People that are under threat of surveillance, and we found it a much more open place for discussion. There are all kinds of points of views, libertarian, new age, whatever you have, but we all kind of coexist very gingerly over there. I would say it's an open place. You don't have the drama, the family drama, of Facebook. You don't run into.
That's why I can't do Facebook. Family drama.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're going to ask you, too, is you don't really do any social media that we can. I mean, there is, like I say, no Facebook, and I guess you have a Twitter.
Just Twitter.
Account. Yeah.
That's Twitter.
How about that?
In Vandeven.
So we do have over on Minds, we have an Artbell group as well as a World Podcast Directory. So we're going to add all this, of course, all these links that have been mentioned here over the course of things today to the show notes. We've got about just another few minutes left here to go. But yeah, if you get a chance, definitely you might want to check out minds.com and see all that it has to offer. The encrypted
It looks really well put together, and I do like the idea of them either. It would be better if they didn't keep logs at all, but you say they don't keep them very long. That's at least something.
Well, yeah, and they've even, we've been watching things over the last year and a half now, I guess, is basically something in that neighborhood, 14, 15, 16 months. The way that things have been developing and kind of unfolding, evolving here, and, with the search engine box, they've got that set up. So you can type in keywords. For example, I just did a search for Artbell, and when you type that in, you have an option to check out, there's different subcategories, activities, videos, images, channels, blogs, and groups. And on top of that, there's a great hashtag feature that they've got in place, which is even better than Twitter. And if you want to compare it to Facebook, they're in two completely different worlds, really. There is no comparison. Facebook, the hashtag, the way that they've got their algorithms set up there is it's atrocious. It's insulting, actually. But Minds is the best that I've yet to find online. I think Pirate Larry would probably agree to that as well, too. But, there is no Bellgab group to this point, at least. So, something you might want to look into. I know Brig is she's over there. Brig Denholm has, she's got her own channel put together, and mainly that's what it is channels and groups. And then, so in your case, if you were interested, you would have your own Bellgab channel, and then you have your group sort of offshoot that you would run together and in tandem. So, let's see now. I'm not sure if there's any other things that you want to just quickly get out there. We've got one of the things I was going to ask you, actually. It's interesting, being a long-time Art Bell fan, you've actually got very little interest in, well, at least rather it's a secondary interest in as far as the paranormal, conspiracy perhaps, occult, what have you. Some of the things that Art is best known for, really. Your main interest and the reason you were drawn to him, I think you maybe were stating earlier, was more like current events, politics, that sort of thing.
Well, and I would say I really enjoyed listening to Art talk about current events, but I just respect him as a broadcaster. I mean, he's a real radio guy. He's not a journalist who got himself a radio talk show or a comedian who got himself a radio talk show. He's just a real radio guy who's been talking into a microphone since he was a kid. And so from that perspective, I really respected him, and I could relate to him because, I mean, starting at the age of I think I was 10, I had a Uniden Washington base station transceiver in my bedroom with a giant Antron 99 antenna outside my house talking to people all over the world. And this was before I even knew Art Bell existed. So when I found Art Bell at the age of 13, it just sounded like some guy that I could really relate to. He had a similar history. It's kind of weird, actually. Some parts of my life have gone down the same path in certain ways. Like Art was a 911 dispatcher. I've done that job. Mm-hmm. He's been into ham radio, that sort of thing, his whole life. I kind of have too. I guess that's why I was attracted to him. But, I mean, I do enjoy certain aspects of the paranormal. But, frankly, most of the podcasts that exist out there talking about the paranormal, most of them are unlistenable. I think probably most podcasts in general are unlistenable. It's a very small percentage that really float to the top, the cream rising to the top. It's a very small percentage that actually do. And I've always found that somehow, particularly podcasts who talk about the paranormal, but even TV shows that talk about the paranormal, somehow they find a way to turn it into the most boring, dull, mundane, uninteresting, sleep-inducing subject imaginable. I don't know how they manage to do that, but they do. And Art had a way of taking subjects that you otherwise wouldn't care about and flipping them in a certain way that you really found them interesting. So while I'm not someone who would ever go out and do a paranormal podcast, because frankly I think most of the so-called paranormal podcasts out there, really most of those hosts are just doing their best Artbell impression. They really are. It's not impressive to me, and that's why, even though I do have certain paranormal interests, I would never venture to do a paranormal podcast. I started podcasting in 2006. I was doing it with a buddy of mine named Tim Pate, and he proposed that we do some sort of a paranormal podcast because he and I had met through the Artbell universe, and just instinctively, no, I wanted nothing to do with that. So I've never done that sort of a podcast. I'm not impressed by most of the people that I hear doing that sort of podcast or radio show. And for me, it's pretty much, when it comes to that genre, Artbell or nothing. I just can't really be bothered.
So what then are some of your favorite podcasts? You mentioned Opie and Anthony a while ago.
Well, that was an actual radio show. That's not a podcast. But as far as podcasts, I do listen to the No Agenda Show pretty regularly, which is hosted by Adam Curry, the former MTV VJ, and columnist John C. Dvorak. I do listen to Limbaugh every day in podcast form. Let's see. I also listen to Dvorak Horowitz, which is a money show hosted by John C. Dvorak and money manager Andrew Horowitz. There's just so much great content out there available for free. It's really amazing. I couldn't find the time to listen to Howard Stern even if I wanted to, just because of all the free stuff that's available to listen to out there. That's why I say, as we move into the future, I don't know how it is that SiriusXM, going back to that subject, continues to pay Howard Stern. I mean, as we move forward, people become more aware of what they can do with these devices in their pockets. It's going to become an even tougher sell to get somebody to pay $15 a month to listen to the radio. I mean, it's all going to implode at some point. I just don't know how long it's going to take. 5 years ago, I would have told you it would be happening right now, and it hasn't. So I don't know.
As far as Stern goes, you can rip, if people are interested, whoever is. I myself, I do this from time to time, but you can just rip his shows right off of YouTube, whether in MP3 format or what have you. So it's
that's right.
Yeah, simple as that. But anyways, how about here's another podcast for you, but I think you've got some sort of connection there as well. Bill and Nancy Burns, the Future Theater Radio. She, of course, Nancy was, I'm not sure if she's ever been on Gab Files or not, but she had her Bella Haven show.
The Gabcast.
Right. Yeah, the Gabcast. The Bella Haven show, which I think is now defunct.
Is it?
Well, I don't know. I think she kind of, they pulled the plug on that and just got...
Oh, Bella Haven, yeah, that's finished, yeah. But the Future Theater, when you said Bella Haven, I thought Future Theater. Okay, yeah, that's still going.
Yeah, well, no, Future Theater, they've taken a hiatus,
what?
I guess. Yeah, well, just a brief hiatus. I think they'll be back in the new year from what Angel Espino, told us we had him on board a couple episodes ago, so that was the deal there. But yeah, they'll be back hopefully. I think starting up in this coming January. They're both doing some writing, I guess, if I recall what exactly the deal is there. Just a bit of a sabbatical. But has she been on your show at all, or what's the connection there with Bella Haven and Belgab?
Well, I mean, all I can say is that Bella Haven was a podcast started by Nancy Burns, and who's the Rose girl is the name she uses on Belgab. Lasha Sinowick, I think, is her name. Those two started the Bella Haven show, both of them Belgab users. They couldn't stay off of each other's throats. Eventually, the whole thing fell apart. And there was this one incident where Nancy Burns called in after my podcast. She was still on the air. She was told effectively that she's still on the air, but for some reason she didn't realize she was on the air. And she released some personal information about her co-host.
Oh no.
And I think that was the beginning of the end. And the way she released that information, it was a little rough. It was a little salty. We'll just put it that way. Yeah. We'll just put it that way. And I think that was the beginning of their implosion as a show.
Yeah, you got to have the right chemistry for sure. And if that's not jiving or clicking, then what's the sense of carrying it on? So
half of these people can't get along with one another. You know, you get these these internet radio shows hosted by two people. They immediately, because they get 50 listeners, start thinking they're about to take over the world. Yeah. And each host has a head that suddenly explodes, and they just can't make it work any longer. I've seen it happen so many times. And that's why, there's this tech podcast that I do with a guy named Curtis Thornton. And he and I we've really slowed our production of those shows down in the last couple of years. But we still could do a show tomorrow, no sweat, and we've just managed to get along. I mean, there have been a couple of bumps along the way, but, I mean, definitely nothing to endanger our ability to do a talk show together. So that's, I think, actually kind of unique in internet podcasting or internet radio shows for two hosts to be able to get along long enough to have any amount of longevity together. It really is just uncanny. You get these guys, they've got 75 listeners, and suddenly they both are looking around to see if their show is listed on the S&P 500 and trying to undermine one another and decide who's going to run the train. It's just silly.
Absolutely. That was one of the issues that just kind of found its way into the conversation here organically, I guess. So with that's the ego that is, we found that with Ashcraft, and it's just, I guess, is the word replete. It's everywhere throughout the broadcasting, entertainment industry, of course, and just people with their big heads and just not able to keep their feet on the ground and their heads clear, and I think a little bit of modesty goes a long way. Maybe not as entertaining, perhaps, but yeah, I guess it all depends. But you're exactly bang on there, and totally.
By the way, I have to say hello to Chefist in the chat room. I gave some shout outs earlier in the show, but I overlooked Chefist, and he entirely deserved a shout out himself. One exclusive of the other shout outs. I felt like I was, receiving a certain vibe of butthurt from him beginning at the top of the show to now because he didn't get that. So there it is. Chefist, I love you, buddy. Every time he calls my show, his call starts out in exactly the same way. Hey, this is Chefist. Hey, this is Chefist. It's Chefist here. Hey, it's Chefist. He's great. So hi, Chefist. Hey, buddy.
Is he based out of is he like East Coast USA, or is he just like playing, is that his shtick or something there with the
No, that's just how he speaks when he's like, hey, this is Chefist.
All right.
You answer the phone and right away, okay, it is Chefist, isn't it? Go ahead, sir.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, he's Chefist. He's been a Belgab user for a long time. I don't know where he lives.
And we've got a few people here. There's a bit of a tug of war back and forth with the stream, with the chat here, that some people want to hear about Falky. Others like, no, we don't know Falky. But I think we really should, because I know that it's you can't when you hear Belgab, it's like Belgab and Falky seem to be almost inseparable. So who is Falky, and what can you tell us about this character?
I guess it was probably 2013. Someone began posting on Belgab with apparently no knowledge of how to post on an internet message board whatsoever. This person was obscenely annoying. This person would go to a website containing an article that he wanted to copy and paste into his message on Belgab, and he would just do like a Control-A on his keyboard to highlight the entire page, and then he would copy and paste everything that was highlighted into his Belgab post and submit. And this happened again and again and again. I think I ended up banning him a couple of times because of it. I was constantly having to jump down his throat and try and get him to stop doing this. This was Falky, George Cinda. This is how his tenure at Belgab.com began back in 2013. Falky 2013 is his username.
Is that the guy from Pittsburgh?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's really...
Hey, how you doing? This is a guy from Pittsburgh. Even though he's never given two shits about how another human being is actually doing his entire life. The irony of him starting his little videos with those words, I find amazing, but that's how he starts every. Hey, how you doing? This is the guy from Pittsburgh. And then he goes into whatever it is that he wants to promote. Maybe it's a visit to the pharmacy, or maybe he has purchased one of those new arm extensions that allow morbidly obese people to wipe their asses where they otherwise couldn't. I mean, he'll do an unboxing for something like that. He'll do an unboxing for a bag of cotton balls that he purchased on his YouTube channel. It's the zenith of entertainment today in 2016, I would say, the guy from Pittsburgh's YouTube channel. So this guy, with his posting habits that I just described for you, copying and pasting the entire contents of a web page into his Belgab post, this guy eventually went on to post all over the forum in this fashion, became rather annoying as a result. A lot of people were put off by it, as you could imagine. And eventually, Curtis Thornton, also known as the Mud King, started a thread called The General Musings of Falky 2013. Mm-hmm. And that's the now infamous Falky thread on Belgab. The reason Curtis created that thread was to try and essentially dig out a canal inside of which Falky's thoughts, activities, musings could be contained. That's the thread that now exists, and I will tell you the amount of pressure that I resisted to delete that thread was actually indescribable. One of the ultimate ironies, I think, is that some of the people who were most loudly dismissing me as a person, as a human being, for allowing that thread to exist, are now some of its most prominent posters, and are now some of the people you can find posting there with the greatest regularity. That's astonishing. And I think when you look at the Falky thread, at the very top of the page, there's a poll that says, should this thread be removed from Belgab? 73, 74% yes, 25, 26% whatever say no. Yet the thread remains, and I like it that a new person might land on Belgab, see the Falky thread, what the hell is this? Mm-hmm. Then they see that poll up at the top asking, well, I think 1,600 people, something like that, have voted in that poll. Should this thread be removed? Well, 75% say yes. Why is it still here? That is such a great hook to a new reader who stumbles upon that putrefied mess, that putrefied cauldron of pig slop known as the Falky thread on Belgab.com. It's just it's an awesome hook. And there are certain stories like this. This Christian Chandler guy, who's probably one of the most notorious examples of a guy getting trolled on the internet and his entire life story being poured out for everybody to evaluate and to develop memes about and to have fun with. I mean, there are these people on the internet, and I think Falky, the guy from Pittsburgh, is another of these sort of storylines, one of these story arcs that just have periods like, you know, the Falky's Beating Kathy saga, or the needed brand new Prius saga, or the gotta get to the Alien Con saga, or I'm about to get kicked out of my apartment saga, or I'm letting Patty live with me for a while saga. I mean, there are all of these little subplots that have happened in the Falke universe and have been directly detailed in that Falke thread over the years, that once this fat tub of mess dies in his bathtub and is discovered a week later because the neighbors can't stand the putrefaction of the air that they otherwise would be breathing, this thread is going to remain as a monument to this human disaster's existence. And I normally wouldn't speak this way about somebody, but I've never seen someone who just, when people try to do nice things for him, I've never seen someone slap their hand so consistently. You know, people who try to give him things or do nice things for him. He's actually a very repulsive human being in terms of how he treats people, but the thread remains because there's a story there. There's a life to it, there's a history, and it's preserved for all to see, and there it shall remain, regardless of the poll result, I will say.
George Senda, the most trusted name in journalism. There we go, George Senda, a.k.a. Falke, a.k.a. the guy from Pittsburgh. Michael, it's been a blast. We've extended things here for a little more than what we usually like to, but that's fine. Found the conversation entertaining and engaging, and I think we've pretty much covered all the main topics and issues that we had hoped to. What websites can you share with us and our listeners that they might want to? I guess there's bellgab.com, of course, that they can easily access. What you have also, though, with your podcast, how would they best do that?
Before I talk about the podcast, one thing I would like to mention quickly is that if you go to bellgab, BELLGAB.com, you can sign in with a Twitter account, with a Facebook account. You don't have to take the time to sign up for a traditional forum account. There's none of that. You could literally, never having used Bellgab, go there and be posting within about 10 seconds. It couldn't be easier. So as you're considering maybe using the forum, keep that in mind. If you would like to hear any of the podcasts I'm involved in, you can go to ufoship.com, and you'll see several podcasts listed there actually in the menu. There's the Spec Sheet, which is a technology podcast that I host with my friend Curtis Thornton. There's Michael Vandeven's Radio Trainwreck, a politics, current events type show that I used to do that I can't say that I do it anymore, which is ironic considering we're in the midst of one of the most comment-worthy election cycles in American history, and I'm not doing a show really to talk about it, but I get burned out in certain regards, I have to confess. And there's also the Fret Files, which is a guitar workshop podcast where Eric Daw talks to you about the physicality of a guitar, anything you could want to know about fixing a guitar, modifying a guitar, building a guitar, the nuances of maintaining a guitar. He talks about all of it. I highly recommend that show. Even if you're not interested in guitars, something about the way he does that show makes it totally listenable. Then, of course, there's the Gabcast, which is, of all mentioned, the most popular. The Gabcast is the official podcast about bellgab.com. It's basically a gossip show where we sit around and just gossip. I mean, it's like some of the worst human instincts in the form of a podcast, all right there packaged for your human enjoyment, for your listening pleasure, the Gabcast. So if you want to check any of those out, I'd greatly appreciate it. And thank you for having me on. It was great fun. I actually really did enjoy this. The time went fast, so that usually means good things happened.
That's the way it tends to go here on the Robin Hood, and I would agree. I think Pirate Larry would tend to agree. Thanks once again to Joshua Chairs, of course, who wasn't here today. We're still trying to track him down, maybe be able to find him somewhere out there in Twitter land. As was mentioned earlier, we've got the Rogues Gallery end of things, the after show portion that we put together here once the main feature wraps up. you've got your hands full there with a couple kids. We've been hearing their voices here over the course of our discussion, so you might have to attend to their needs, of course, with whatever. Let's see, it's kind of late, actually. It's about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, almost out there in Missouri. So, but anyone else that's in the YouTube chat area, you're welcome to join us as we transition on over. Well, we'll choose, I guess we'll either Skype or Google Hangouts or appear.in. It all really it's all pretty much up in the air and depending on how people are set up there from a technical standpoint. But yeah, thanks once again. Very much appreciated. Pirate Larry, I'm not sure if you've got any just closing comments. We're going to head on over. I'm not sure if we're going to go to the Scurvy Dog or the Mossy Wench here today. The Howling Wolf last week was a bit of a blast.
That was a blast. No, we're headed back to the Mossy Wench tonight because the grog is 50% off.
Well, that's
tonight only. There'll be plenty of action at the Mossy Wench tonight.
I imagine there will be. So we've got a number of people there that are. It looks like they do have quite a few questions and will hopefully be joining us. So that sounds like a great idea.
All right, matey. We'll see you soon. Thanks,
guys. Have a good night. I have to go. Various parts of my home have been on fire for the last 45 minutes. It's a madhouse in the next room. Kids, they're great.
Okay, Michael, good night.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Google Hangouts as we hold our regular feature content after show wrap-up. Currently navigating through a significant patch of transition and restructuring, our original website and its exclusive membership section were recently placed on a temporary hiatus. With a new web domain presence now in place at WPRPN.com, we naturally hope to have things more fully restored and premium after-show archives easily accessible as soon as possible. Don't forget to check us out as we continue streaming live every Friday night over YouTube and TuneIn.com, starting at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Saturdays, 12 p.m. noon in both Tokyo and Seoul. Upcoming shows include next week's interview with independent journalist and muckraker Mary Carmel. Her thoughts and insights regarding the outcome of this year's mind-boggling presidential campaign will likely manage to pack something of a punch. Of course, what would any November schedule be without a JFK memorial? Listeners can look forward to this as we bring several outstanding personalities together, including longtime researchers Rob Clark and Carolyn Rose Goida, to be part of our first annual JFK Roundtable. Listeners will also want to keep an ear out for any future announcements regarding this year's Operation Secret Santa. Word has it, the jolly old man with the long white beard is looking to form yet another army of elves this year, as well as attract the support of any number of podcasters, musicians, comedians, and performers. More information can be obtained via our email address, pirateoneradio@gmail.com, or by joining us in any of the after shows over the next few weeks. Finally, we are now booking for 2017. If you yourself have an idea for an upcoming show or quality guest in mind, feel free to drop us a line, either through email or by visiting us at our new web location, WPRPN.com. So until we meet again out in the high digital seas, this has been episode 38 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. I am your host as always, the Robin Hood's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder, signing off.